Death is not an ending, it's a transformation. While the physical body ceases to function, something far more profound begins its journey into realms beyond our ordinary perception. What happens to the soul during that crucial first year after leaving the physical world is both mysterious and deeply meaningful, affecting not only the departed but also those they leave behind. The moment of death marks the beginning of the soul's most significant transition. Unlike the abrupt finality we might imagine, the soul's departure from the body is more like the gradual loosening of ancient bonds that have held consciousness to matter for an entire lifetime. This process doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds in stages, each carrying its own significance and challenges. In those first moments after the heart stops beating, consciousness doesn't simply vanish. Instead, it begins to separate from its physical vessel while maintaining full awareness of what's happening around it. Many who have experienced near-death episodes describe this exact phenomenon, feeling themselves floating above their own bodies, observing medical teams working frantically below, hearing conversations they shouldn't be able to hear. The soul at this stage remains deeply connected to the physical realm but exists in a state of profound confusion. Imagine waking up in a familiar room where everything looks slightly different, where people you know act as if you're invisible, where your voice echoes but no one responds. This disorientation occurs because the soul still carries the imprint of physical existence, the same thoughts, memories, and emotional patterns that defined its earthly experience. During the first few hours and days following death, the soul often attempts to maintain its familiar routines. It may try to return home, comfort grieving family members, or complete unfinished tasks. These attempts create a kind of spiritual friction when the soul realizes that doors no longer open to its touch, that its words fall on unhearing ears, that the physical world has become inaccessible, despite being clearly visible. This initial period is particularly challenging for souls who experienced sudden or traumatic deaths. The shock of unexpected departure can leave consciousness in a state of denial, unable to comprehend why everything has changed so dramatically. Some souls spend considerable time hovering around their former bodies, following paramedics, staying close to hospital rooms, desperately trying to re-establish the connection they've lost. But not every soul experiences this confusion alone. Those who lived with spiritual awareness, who cultivated faith or maintained practices that connected them to higher consciousness, often find themselves guided more quickly through this initial disorientation. Spiritual guides, beings of light, or deceased loved ones appear to offer support and explanation, helping the newly departed soul understand its new reality. The first 7 days after death hold particular significance across numerous spiritual traditions, as this period represents what many describe as an energetic corridor, a time when the soul remains closely connected to the material plane while beginning to accept its changed state. During these 7 days, the soul often maintains a strong presence around its former life, observing the immediate aftermath of its departure. You might be surprised to learn that the soul frequently attends its own funeral or memorial service. From this unique vantage point, it witnesses the impact of its earthly existence on others. Every tear shed, every story shared, every moment of gratitude or regret contributes to the soul's understanding of the legacy it has left behind. This witnessing serves a crucial purpose, helping the departed consciousness begin to grasp the full meaning of the life it has just completed. During this 7-day period, sensitive individuals often report feeling the presence of the departed, a gentle breeze in a closed room, an unexpected chill, the sense of someone standing nearby when no one is visible. These experiences aren't imagination, but genuine contact with a soul still learning to navigate its new existence. The departed haven't left. They're simply learning to exist in a different way. What happens during these first 7 days is profoundly influenced by the emotional state of those left behind. The soul, still vibrating at a frequency close to the material world, remains deeply affected by the grief, anger, or acceptance of its loved ones. Overwhelming despair, desperate pleas for return, or refusal to accept the death can create energetic bonds that make it difficult for the soul to move forward in its journey. Conversely, prayers offered with love, peaceful acceptance of the natural cycle of life and death, and expressions of gratitude for time shared create supportive energy that helps guide the soul toward its next phase. This doesn't mean suppressing grief, which is natural and necessary, but rather channeling that grief in ways that honor both the departed and the continuing journey of the soul. Many cultures mark the seventh day with specific rituals, masses, or gatherings. From a spiritual perspective, this timing isn't coincidental. It represents a natural completion point where the energetic ties binding the soul to its former existence begin to loosen significantly. If the soul has been able to accept its new state and has received appropriate support from both the living and spiritual guides, this seventh day marks the opening of what many describe as a tunnel of light, a bridge, or a gateway leading to higher dimensions of existence. However, not every soul moves through this transition according to a strict timeline. Some pass through this initial stage within hours, while others may remain in this liminal space for weeks or even months. The determining factors include the soul's level of spiritual preparation during life, the circumstances of death, and the degree of attachment to material existence. As the soul moves beyond the 7-day threshold, it enters what many traditions describe as a 40-day period of deeper transformation. As this extended time frame appears across various spiritual paths, from Christianity's account of Jesus remaining among the disciples for 40 days after resurrection, to Buddhist teachings about the intermediate state between lives, to Spiritist understanding of the purification process. During these 40 days, the soul undergoes what can best be described as a comprehensive life review. This isn't a judgment imposed by external authorities, but rather an internal process of understanding and integration. The soul experiences every significant moment from its recent earthly existence, but with a crucial difference: it now perceives these events from all perspectives involved. If the soul caused pain to another during its lifetime, it now experiences that pain exactly as the other person felt it. And if it offered love and kindness, it feels the joy and comfort those actions brought to others. This isn't punishment or reward in the traditional sense, but rather a profound education in the interconnectedness of all consciousness and the lasting impact of every thought, word, and action. Throughout this review process, the soul is typically accompanied by spiritual mentors or guides. These beings don't come to judge or criticize, but to help the soul understand the lessons embedded in its experiences. They assist in recognizing patterns, understanding the purposes behind various challenges and relationships, and identifying areas where growth is still needed. This 40-day period also involves a gradual release from material attachments, and the soul begins to let go of its emotional ties to possessions, career achievements, social status, and even addictive behaviors that may have influenced its earthly existence. This doesn't mean forgetting or devaluing these experiences, but rather seeing them in their proper perspective as temporary aspects of a much larger spiritual journey. Perhaps most significantly, during this time, the soul learns to release its attachment to the physical forms of love while recognizing the eternal nature of genuine spiritual connection. It may still feel deep love for family members and friends, but this love becomes purified of possessiveness, jealousy, or the desperate need for reciprocation that often complicates human relationships. The 40-day period is often when dreams of the deceased become most vivid and meaningful for those still living. And these aren't ordinary dreams, but actual meetings on the astral plane, opportunities for the soul to offer comfort, share final messages, or simply provide reassurance that consciousness continues beyond physical death. When you wake from such a dream feeling that the encounter was completely real, trust that instinct, because it very likely was. As this 40-day cycle nears completion, the soul experiences what many describe as a final energetic release. the last threads connecting it to dense material vibrations are dissolved, freeing consciousness to access higher dimensions of existence. For many people still on Earth, this moment can be felt as a sudden sense of peace, an intuitive knowing that their loved one has truly found rest and is no longer struggling with the confusion of the initial transition. But the soul's journey through its first year after death extends far beyond these initial transition periods. Having moved through the immediate aftermath and the intensive review process, consciousness now enters a phase that might be called spiritual rehabilitation and education. This is where the soul begins to heal from any wounds carried over from physical existence and to prepare for whatever comes next in its eternal journey. Many spiritual traditions describe special healing centers or colonies in the subtle realms where souls receive the care they need. These aren't physical locations in the way we understand them, but rather vibrational environments perfectly suited to each soul's specific needs. Here, consciousness can rest, recover, and begin to remember its true nature beyond the limitations of any single lifetime. Some souls require what can only be described as spiritual rest after the intensity of physical existence. They may sleep for extended periods, allowing their consciousness to reorganize and rebalance after the challenges of earthly life. Others are ready for more active healing, receiving what might be compared to therapy sessions with highly evolved spiritual beings who help them process difficult experiences and release lingering trauma. Education in these realms operates differently than earthly learning. Instead of absorbing information intellectually, souls directly experience the truths they need to understand. They might revisit challenging relationships from their recent life, but now see the deeper spiritual purposes those connections served. They begin to understand universal laws like the law of cause and effect, the power of thoughts to create reality, and the fundamental interconnectedness of all existence. Throughout this healing and education phase, which can last months in earthly time, the soul maintains the capacity to visit the physical plane. These visits often occur when loved ones are struggling with grief, facing major decisions, or simply need comfort. The soul may appear in dreams, send signs through synchronicities, or simply maintain a loving presence that sensitive individuals can feel. As the soul grows stronger and more comfortable in its new existence, it begins to consider what comes next. Some choose to remain in the subtle realms for extended periods, taking on roles as guides for other transitioning souls or as spiritual helpers for those still incarnated on Earth. Others begin to feel called toward eventual reincarnation, recognizing lessons they still need to learn or service they want to provide through another physical lifetime. The decision about future directions isn't made impulsively, but involves careful consultation with spiritual mentors and deep consideration of the soul's evolutionary needs. Every aspect of a potential future incarnation would be planned with great care, including the family environment, major challenges and opportunities, and the specific people who will play important roles in the soul's continued development. One of the most beautiful aspects of the soul's first year after death is how it maintains active connection with loved ones still on Earth. This connection operates beyond the limitations of physical senses, functioning through what can only be described as heart-to-heart communication. When you feel a sudden sense of your departed loved one's presence, when their favorite song plays at just the right moment, when you find coins in unusual places or notice their favorite flower blooming out of season, these aren't coincidences but genuine communications from a soul that continues to care about your well-being. The quality of this ongoing connection is profoundly influenced by how both the living and the departed handle the grief process. When those left behind can move through their natural grief while maintaining love and gratitude for the time shared, they create ideal conditions for continued spiritual contact. However, when grief becomes desperate clinging, when people refuse to accept the death or make promises never to move forward, they inadvertently create energetic chains that can interfere with the soul's continued journey. This doesn't mean you should suppress your grief or pretend to be okay when you're not. Grief is love with nowhere to go, and it needs to be felt and expressed. But there's a difference between healthy grieving that honors the relationship and unhealthy attachment that tries to prevent the natural cycle of spiritual evolution. As the first year progresses, many families notice changes in how they relate to their departed loved one's memory. The sharp edge of early grief often softens into something more like warm remembrance. Stories are shared with smiles rather than tears. The person's positive qualities are celebrated while their human flaws are forgiven and understood in a larger context. This transformation in the living often corresponds with developments in the soul's own journey. As the departed consciousness heals and grows in the spiritual realms, it becomes capable of sending different kinds of energy to those it loves. Instead of the sometimes heavy presence felt in early months, the soul's visits become lighter, more uplifting, carrying messages of hope and encouragement rather than sadness or regret. The approach of the first anniversary of death marks another significant transition point. Many spiritual traditions recognize this date as completing a full cycle of mourning and transformation. By this time, the soul has typically established itself firmly in its new existence, whether that means settling into life in the spiritual realms or beginning preparation for reincarnation. The first death anniversary doesn't have to be observed only with sadness. While honoring the natural grief that the day might bring, it can also become a celebration of consciousness, continuing in new forms. Some families use this anniversary to share favorite memories, perform acts of service in their loved one's honor, or simply spend quiet time feeling gratitude for the ongoing spiritual connection they maintain. What makes the first year after death so crucial is that it establishes patterns that will influence the soul's continued journey for potentially many lifetimes to come. The lessons learned, the healing accomplished, and the wisdom gained during this transition period become permanent additions to the soul's growing understanding of existence. In this sense, death isn't an ending at all, but rather a graduation to new levels of consciousness and capability. For those of us still living in physical bodies, understanding what happens during the soul's first year after death can transform how we approach both life and loss. Knowing that consciousness continues, that our actions and emotions affect departing souls, and that love truly is eternal, can inspire us to live more consciously and love more freely while we have the chance. This knowledge also offers profound comfort during times of loss. Instead of viewing death as cruel separation, we can understand it as transformation, a natural part of consciousness's eternal journey toward greater wisdom and love. The tears we shed honor the human experience we shared, while our ongoing love provides energy that supports the soul's continued evolution. Perhaps most importantly, recognizing the reality of the soul's journey after death can motivate us to prepare spiritually for our own eventual transition. Cultivating practices that connect us with higher consciousness, working to heal emotional wounds, practicing forgiveness, and developing genuine love for others all contribute to making our own death transition smoother and more conscious when the time comes. The soul's first year after death is ultimately a story of love's triumph over apparent separation, of consciousness transcending the limitations of physical existence, and of eternal relationships that no grave can sever. Every soul that successfully navigates this transition becomes a beacon of hope and proof that what we truly are extends far beyond any single lifetime. As you reflect on these mysteries, remember that death is not something that happens to us, but something we do, actively and consciously, when our earthly mission is complete. The love we share, the growth we achieve, and the service we offer during our physical existence all contribute to making that ultimate transition a celebration rather than a tragedy. And in understanding this, we discover that life and death are simply different movements in consciousness's eternal dance.